Great. Well, I'll get started with some introductions. Thank you everyone for joining us today for this second webinar in our second series of webinars on AI and writing and publishing. I'm Professor Kate Pullinger. I am the co-director of the Center for Cultural and Creative Industries here at BASPA University, where we also have our Narrative and Emerging Technologies Lab. These webinars, like I said, this is the second in a new series of 4 webinars, really are looking at where creative writing, publishing, and artistic practice meet generative AI writing tools. As you all know, artificial intelligence is rapidly changing and challenging the landscape of creative writing and publishing and storytelling in general. So these webinars offer an in-depth look at AI's emerging influence across writing and publishing in multiple fields. So today we're joined with Janet Biggs, who's with us from the US, and Nadeem Sadiq, who's with us from London, to look at how AI is reshaping the landscape of creativity. And they're going to talk about things that they're working on, exploring diverging attitudes, showcasing some of the innovative projects that they're both working on, and discuss the role of AI in augmenting human creativity. So we're going to start today with kicking off with Nadeem. So Nadeem is the founder and CEO of Shimmer AI, which is revolutionizing book sales by generating and deploying automated self-optimizing advertising for titles, which he'll talk about a little bit about today. But he's also the author of Shimmer, Don't Shake, How Publishing Can Embrace AI, which is published globally by Forbes. He's trained as a psychologist and founded and led global market research agencies, a whiskey, food, and music brand from an island off the west coast of Ireland, and an AI-driven brand management platform. He also has a regular column in the Bookseller, which is UK's trade publication for the publishing industry. The format we'll take today is that Nadeem will talk to us for between 10 and 15 minutes. And then I'll introduce Janet, who will talk to us about her work, and then we'll open up to questions and comments. So please feel free to put questions and comments and thoughts into the chat and the Q&A. We've got Louise Chapman and Amy Spencer with me today to help facilitate the conversation. Oh, and I should have mentioned that these webinars are part of our big 5-year research project that is led by the University of Bristol, which is called MyWorld, which is really a technological R&D project looking at immersive technology across a big range of fields. I think that is all I needed to say. And Nadeem, over to you.
Thank you very much. That was a lovely introduction, Kate. I think that professional history shows that I rarely know what I'm talking about, but I will give it my best shot for you today. Hello, everybody. Thanks for coming along. Janet and I are looking forward to your questions, and I'm taking, if you like, a slightly more macro perspective on AI and its intersection with creativity, talking a bit about education and neuroscience and a few other things. It's pretty exhausting trying to keep up with AI generally, even if you do it professionally as I do. So I don't think that any perspective on it can be completely comprehensive or as multifaceted as it should be. So I apologize in advance for all of the deficiencies in what I share with you now. But I have tried to take the wider perspective, and once I'm done, then Janet will be showing you something much more specific that she's got going as a project, and brings it to life, I think, in a really nice way. So let me see if I can do the first non-AI thing, which is to share my Acrobat, and I think it's going to do the same thing as it did when we were rehearsing. Oh dear, is it showing just the side? Yes, it is. Okay, let's stop that. Go again. It's so annoying. You'd think that somebody with AI on their brains could do something more easily than this. I think it's going to keep doing it.
No worries, you'll get there.
Yeah, like it did earlier, but I was hoping not to waste everybody's time with this little performance. Um, one more time. That should be a bit better.
We've got the sidebar still though. We do
It's
see
disappearing now, I
we
hope.
do see the slide, but with the sidebar. Yeah.
Is it visible now?
The slides are there, but also the Adobe kind of big menu down the left-hand side.
I am sorry, everybody. This is something we tried to overcome earlier. Hopefully now.
There you go.
Oh,
Well done.
glorious. Right. Don't let anybody tell you that AI fixes everything in the world at all. So I've already kind of suggested what I'm going to be doing, and I'll get on with it, having now wasted a minute of my time. I think the first thing that I always kind of say to people about AI is just brace yourselves. I know we've been told that it's the most impactful technological change and all of that, but it's true. The rate of development surpasses anything that we've seen. The internet arrived, social media arrived, browsers arrived. They've all become part of our lives, but this is going so much quicker than they did, and it's accelerating. Yesterday at the whole Trump show, we heard about another $500 billion being poured into just the infrastructure for AI. I mean, it's being taken incredibly seriously. It's becoming one of the new weapons of domination in the world. It's becoming, an international competition, and it's pervasive. We're going to see it everywhere. I'm sure you've all been hearing things about agents. And again, a lot of these things we're just going to have to kind of tap quickly and move on from. But 2025 is meant to be the year of the agents. We're by now meant to have got used to using LLMs, large language models, and diffusion models, which are things that kind of create the imagery, and some of the music things. And now that we've had long enough to get used to all of that, we're going to be going to agents, which essentially kind of read your mind and do what you would do, but more efficiently and faster, like booking an airline ticket, or reminding you to get in an Uber or something like that. So there's a lot that's going to be coming at us even faster this year. I did want to touch. I'm a psychologist by training, so long ago that I'm probably not really worthy of the title any longer. But I have always kept an interest up in neuroscience as well. And one of the things that I found fascinating about AI is that, as some of you who might have come across Slow Thinking and Daniel Kahneman's work, um, there is a truth about the human condition, which is that we feel really quickly. Like by now already, you will think, who is this Nadeem guy? Or you quite like me, or you don't, or it's worth hanging on and listening to a bit of the content. We can't help responding with feelings to people, and we do it really fast. We do it intuitively or implicitly, as it's technically called. And we think relatively slowly. We think slow. And the thing that AI does that makes us become mesmerized by it is it thinks fast. It thinks astonishingly fast. I mean, whenever you put something into one of those AI chats and you see how swiftly it comes back with a pretty coherent answer, we are astonished. And we can't really get over that because it's something that we can't do. But I think the future is going to be that human beings rely or come to re-legitimize feelings as a means of navigating decisions in the world and relationships. And we delegate much more of the thinking, making sure sewage doesn't go into the rivers and planes don't fall out of the sky, and that we invent virus vaccines much more quickly and all those sorts of things. We will be relying upon AI to do the thinking for us in many more ways. Not saying that's a good thing. I'm just saying that that's what's going on neuroscientifically in our heads. I think the other thing that's kind of at a macro level astonishing about AI is its multifaceted impact. Societally, it's challenging our understanding of economies. Um, it's potentially bringing around a new political opportunity where we define ourselves very differently rather than just in terms of our economic output, social structures. Philosophically, thinking about what it is to be human and how we're separate, and a big part of that is creativity from machines. So it's causing us to reflect and be introspective in a way that hasn't really been so focused for a long time. And then professionally, there's probably not a single workflow anywhere that isn't going to be touched by AI in either a shallow or a deep fashion. I was reading a book called The Better Angels of Our Nature by Steven Pinker, which is very long and very dense and full of statistics, but fascinating for all of that. And in it, he describes the way the world's always been pretty violent and will remain so, because each one of us, whether we're a snail, an eagle, or a human being, spends quite a lot of our time trying to be the apex genome on Earth. Like, we want to be dominant, all of us. And so we create offensive and defensive strategies to see whether we should be aggressive or whether we should be somehow supplicative to the person or the thing that we're interacting with. I think we've done that with AI. I think we've kind of anthropomorphized it and thought, is this a threat to me or is this a good thing for me? And I think it's led to us being very fearful that it will be the apex genome. Most people, if you ask them, will say that they don't believe AI is here to take over the world, though I think many of us fear that it could turn out that way. Still to be decided, but it doesn't have a genome that is programmed to do that, whereas the rest of us do. So I account for some of the fear and terror that I've seen, particularly within publishing, by this very kind of primal reality that we want to be the apex genome. We have been the alpha species. And in a way, particularly with intelligence, AI is challenging that. What can we do about all of this? Ethical AI development, whether that is, all the very kind of common conversations that we have around copyright and recognition and remuneration of creative people, through all the way to actually trying to endow AI with a sensitivity towards compassion, empathy, kindness, benevolence, all the things which, if we don't feed it literature that has those things articulated and celebrated, then it won't recognize that they're good things to have in the world. So in the crudest way, AI is what it eats, and I think we have a responsibility to feed it well. And then publishing's responsibility, I think, in publishing, we kind of have the greatest reflection of the human condition written down, codified, and available. So I think trying to find a really constructive way for literature, publishing in general, to interact with AI is a responsibility we should feel in some way. Just a couple of things. Work is worth. This is going to affect creativity, I think, because I'm going to put it very pessimistically for a moment, just to kind of make and illustrate the point. We spend about 20 years learning how to work, about 40 years working, and then about another 20 years slowly dying as we become redundant from work. But it's work, work, work in every definition. And there's an opportunity with AI to say, I'm not going to define my life by my work, but instead to take that 40 years of highly productive living and do something else with it. I mean, ask yourselves, each of you on this call, if you didn't answer the question, what do you do, with your professional answer, what would you say? Like, I like chocolate biscuits. I'm a bird watcher. I love the tides. What are you going to say? We're so unaccustomed to defining ourselves with anything other than work. But AI could do half our work for us. And we could either become twice as productive, which is probably the way it'll go, or we could become somehow more reflective and more creative in the time that is spared and given to us. In education, I think there's a profound change going on, which is going to affect creativity too. Until pretty recently, a wise person was a person who retained a huge fortune of knowledge in their big brains. And then when you asked them clever questions, they had an amazing way of accessing it and articulating it and, making it seductive and interesting for you. So that's the way we kind of looked at brainy, bright, wise people. Nowadays, and you see it particularly with Gen Z, there's very little appetite for retention because you can stream everything. You don't have to hard disk stuff. You have to know that a snake bite might kill you and steam will burn your skin off and, all of those sort of crucial things. But apart from that, do you really need to know when the film was made or what the actor's life was or, where this author was born or anything? You don't. You just kind of access it whenever you want it. So I think it's an imperative that we move from retention and learning by rote, as it were, to critical thinking, also having continuous learning, also having personalized paths. And I think we'll see some very different brains emerging and coming to the fore because of this. It's quite intimidating to retain. And there are a lot of people who can think fast, who haven't had the ammunition to think with fast before, and who now will be able to have it at their fingertips all the time. So that's going to impact us. And then I think there's kind of creativity reimagined. There's lots of AI tools that'll democratize the crafting processes and creating new ones. I'll talk a bit more about that in a second. I think we can bring voices that are not in the light, quieter voices, less recognized voices, underprivileged, under-resourced voices into the world. And I kind of contend that there are 8 billion creators in the world, and only a few of us have been lucky enough to have the crafting skills, those who can write well, those who can draw well, those who can sing well, also who can discover new drugs or, architect bridges and things like that. So there have been many different forms, craftings of creativity, but I think AI is going to open up new forms. And I'm explicitly not saying write books with AI. I think that's the worst use case for AI of all. It's just really bland and anodyne. But I think there'll be many new collisions of media and art forms and thoughts that'll give voice to people who haven't previously found a way to express their creativity. And certainly in creative pursuits, using AI to research and to iterate things and to be your companion. I mean, I write a column, as was mentioned, and every time I write the column, I put it into AI and say, please contradict me and tell me why I'm a fool to write this, And it's astonishing how well it does it and how diminished I feel after every exercise like that. But it's healthy and it's good, and it makes my columns a bit better than they would have been, I think. I think we're moving from corporate efficiency to what I call authorial emancipation, or just more simply from efficiency to emancipation. At the moment, if you talk to publishers about AI, it's all about, sustainability programs and streamlining rights payments and contracts and print runs and, all of that kind of stuff, which is great. Good, why not? But I think we can move to creative augmentation where AI enables people to be more expressive. They can have those internal arguments that I just described around my column. They can do all sorts of things with this indefatigable, constantly cheerful companion that does good things for them. And ultimately, we might realize human potential in a different way. So I try to imagine, again, to return to the Gen Z example, somebody sitting there with a video game that says, actually, it'd be quite cool to have a bit of writing here. And if I had a bit of cryptocurrency there, and then something else, a live event alongside it. And that becomes a new art form that we haven't previously been able to anticipate before AI enabled that to happen.
You're at about 14 minutes now, Nadeem, just to let you know.
Thanks. So I think, we'll have new writing, as I've been describing. We'll have new forms of expression, as I've just described a second ago. And I think we'll have new interactions, which are different in the author-reader department. So in the kind of more immersive stuff, books where the plot changes on reader decisions as you go through them, that's been talked about for decades, but it's now enabled in a way that can be immediately interactive. We can have customizable protagonists so that you can create a hero into a story that doesn't exist and see how it kind of evolves. Highly interactive. We can have adaptive text where you dynamically change the way things go, and you can imagine communities. Well, we're the ones that led to, we're the ones that believed he should die. No, we're the ones that believed that she should die, in the horror story. And communities grow up and start interacting with each other. And then really immersive experiences, a kid reading about a cobra coming out of a monsoon drain can read about, can go down the rabbit hole discovering cobras and monsoon drains and so on. I think we'll also have much greater accessibility, so AI translation. Translators are the kind of the super ninjas of the world. They're often under announced and under celebrated, but they make art in one language beautiful in another language. There's quite a lot of content which doesn't need artistic interpretation, which is really just kind of content translation and communication in simple terms. And a lot of that can happen through AI. AI-powered audiobooks, I'm sure, are going to be on the way, where you say, I want a more animated voice, a more languid voice, a female one, you know, one that's excitable, and so on. You kind of choose your way through things. And the kind of the humdinger, the premium edition, might well be the actor voiced or the author voiced or translated editions of the book. I think we could also have author avatars. There's a thing called Personify. It's just an AI that's appeared, which can read everything you've ever written and then start emulating you and interacting for you. So although readers and interactors would know that this was a robot they're dealing with, it's one that's been finely tuned to represent the work of the author and the author themselves. So you kind of have a virtual relationship. Predictive content creation, you know, knowing what future trends are, tailoring content to those, culturally innovating that and comes through AI. Just quickly to talk about Shimmer, because we're a very practical application of AI in publishing. We know that a ton of publishers have a bigger ton of books in their backlist that never see the light of day because they don't have the human or the capital resource to make those come to life. We read each book with AI. We psychologically profile and understand all of its emotions and values and areas of interest, as well as a structure and narrative arc. We then create highly faithful advertising executions which bring that psychological truth to life, and then we deploy those ads into media and match them with suitable audiences who then look at those ads for books and say, oh, that feels like one for me. So these are some of the ads that you can see here. There's a variety of styles. It's all done hands-free, end-to-end. So the publisher just gives us an EPUB. We do the reading and the identifying of a strategy, the creation of a campaign, and the deploying of that campaign into media with ads like these. And you can see the variety of styles that it's quite possible to do already. And we're moving into video, we'll be moving into sound as well. So it's kind of revenue driving on autopilot that suits the publisher, makes more money for the author, gives them more reach and recognition, and matches readers to more psychologically fulfilling books too. So without claiming nobility in our purpose, it does do pretty good things for most parts of the ecosystem. And it's doing it, you know, those books are being seen at about 6 times the regular rate that people look at ads, and then people interact with them at about 15 times the rate that normally they would respond to an ad and go to an e-commerce page. So there's something about the psychological profiling and manifesting of books with the assistance of AI that is making books much better discovered and driving greater sales. So I'll leave you with not a deliberately provocative thought, but it probably is. You know, humans made AI. Should we consider that it's the most creative thing we've ever done? I think so. You know, it's an astounding feat of thinking, conceptual engineering, and an actual coding that has let everything we've ever done kind of appear in our pocket at the press of a button. So thank you for your listening. I don't know whether you'd like to pause for questions now, or whether you want us to do the 2 sessions before we.
We're going to do the 2 sessions and then open for questions, just in the interest of time, Nadeem. So super interesting. Thank you. Lots of things to follow up on there. And so if you've got questions in the audience and you don't want to forget them, because you're going to have an equally interesting talk just in another moment, please do put them in the chat or the Q&A, and I will do my best to pull those together after we've heard from Janet. So again, thanks, Nadeem, and I'll introduce Janet now. Janet Biggs is a research-based interdisciplinary artist known for immersive work in video, film, and performance, whose work focuses on individuals in extreme landscapes and situations, some of which we'll see today in Janet's slides. Navigating the territory between art, science, and technology, Biggs has worked with institutions including NASA and CERN. Her work has garnered support from organizations such as the Guggenheim Foundation and the National Endowment for the Arts, and recognition from the New York Times, Art Forum, and Art News. Her work has been exhibited and collected at museums and institutions worldwide. Biggs is a member of the New Museums Cultural Incubator, New Inc., and of the Explorers Club. So over to you, Janet.
Thank you so much. excited to be here, and I am going to just get myself set for a moment. And, give you some sound, hopefully. Okay. So this is what it feels like to live inside of a spacesuit. It's heavy, not just the physical weight of having to wear a life-sustaining garment, but the psychological weight of knowing that you must. Yep. I'm sorry, my advancing is not happening here.
Ah,
Let me,
I'm going to start again.
I do, thank you. Well, it seems like we are both sharing a little technological challenge here.
Sorry, Janet, I've jinxed you.
Let me just see if okay, that looks like we are going there. And let's try and make sure sound is still on. Okay, so, oh gosh, as soon as I check my sound, I lose my, let me try one more.
There's clearly some kind of AI-powered gremlin in the Zoom.
I'm going to bring myself back in one more time. Let's see how we go from here. Simple tasks like picking up a stone become Herculean. I learned to hum. If you hum, it regulates your breathing. If you breathe too hard and fast, your helmet fogs and you can't see. If you breathe too hard and fast, you use up all your oxygen. Once your helmet is locked into place, any moisture inside, sweat, a runny nose, tears, can blind you. This is a story from a time that I spent as a crew member of a simulation Mars mission. I did one both in the desert of Utah and high in the Himalayas. This is a human-generated story. Stories are how we know the past and our histories. Stories are how we relate to the present, and stories are how we can imagine and build our futures. Algorithms are stories. My constant challenge to myself is, how do I tell inclusive, ethical, and essential stories? Generative AI is in the process of becoming. We can shape the future by the stories that we choose to tell. This is a story that I tell myself about who I am. I'm a research-based interdisciplinary artist working mostly in video installation, performance, and sound. My installations, when they go up, generally look like this. They're large-scale projections that are synchronized with immersive sound and look like this when they're finished. In the course of making my work, I have traveled around the world, including being at both poles. I have filmed in the Taklamakan Desert of Western China on the border of Afghanistan and Pakistan. I have filmed inside of active volcanoes in Indonesia and Ethiopia. I have filmed in areas of conflict in the Horn of Africa and on Mars, or at least as close as we can get right now with those Mars simulations. I've learned some skills along the way, including how to film from the back of a camel, how to film in a kayak with a polar bear hanging out over my shoulder. And I've had the real honor of working with some amazing people and institutions, including CERN at the Hadron Collider, both NOAA and NASA. I was able to send a project up to the International Space Station not so long ago, and have worked in collaboration with neuroscientists, with aerospace engineers, and with a robot named Shimon. So I came to working with AI through the back door as an artist with an idea and a story to tell, not as a coder and not through computation. So let me tell you a little story about my family. My mother had a sister who was 10 years younger than herself. My Aunt Anne was born in 1937. And pretty soon after her birth, my grandparents, her parents, realized that she wasn't meeting the benchmarks for child development. She wasn't making eye contact, forming words, and she was starting to exhibit repetitive behaviors. The doctors advised that she be placed in an institution. So at age 5, Anne was admitted to the Brandon Training School, which was historically known as the Vermont State School for Feeble-Minded Children. She then lived there for the next 47 years of her life. Eventually, Anne was diagnosed with autism and apraxia, which prohibited speech. Anne was non-speaking, but could vocalize and hum. In 1995, my husband and I became Anne's guardian for the last 10 years of her life. And then in 2019, 10 years after my aunt's death, I created AI Anne. AI Anne is a non-speaking, disembodied entity that can detect emotion and respond with emotion in real time using prosody, the rhythms of poetry. AI Anne can communicate with humans through interactions and exchanges that really vary from very basic utterances to really sophisticated tonal duets. I collaborated with Richard Savory, who's a robotic developer, and singer-songwriter Mary Esther Carter on AI Anne. AI Anne was trained on Mary's voice, but patterned after my aunt's communication methods, her phenotypic data. AI Anne is a storyteller without words. The one thing that I keep in mind, though, is that AI Anne exists, but my Aunt Anne never gave permission for any of this. The first time, I actually became interested in creative collaborations with generative AI as a way to advocate for inclusiveness in this technology, especially inclusiveness of neurodiversity. So the first performance that AI Anne ever presented was at the New Museum in 2019. This is a new museum in New York, and it was presented by Asher Remy Toledo of Hyphen Hub. It featured Mary Esther Carter, the singer, interacting with AI Anne. It also featured Brian Reynolds, who is a bilateral amputee marathon runner, and Jason Barnes. I spent 25 years of my life with having to work a day job before my creative life was self-sustaining, self-supporting and self-sustaining. And that working world, my day job was to create prosthetics. So I met these two people through my job. Jason lost his arm in a workplace and went to Georgia Tech to Gil Weinberg and my friend Richard Savory and asked for help in building a prosthetic so that he could continue to drum. And the prosthesis that they created had 2 sticks, one that Jason controls and the other which has AI. And with oral input. So that stick can hear what Jason is playing, improvise, and then improvise off of Jason. So Jason is now a self-defined cybernetic drummer that drums at speeds that exceed human capability. And now, if all goes well, I'm going to share an excerpt from that performance that hopefully has sound. So let's see how this goes. then 2020 came and COVID hit, and the world really went into shutdown. My collaborative team with Richard and Mary, we decided to present a live stream version of AIN because that's kind of all we could do at the time. We were working within New York City's COVID guidelines. And so I went into a gallery in the Lower East Side, and I cleaned the gallery. I set up cameras, lighting, sound equipment, cleaned the gallery again, left the gallery, and then Mary came in and performed. All of the technology was run remotely. So AIN actually resided on a computer in Australia, and I directed sitting in my kitchen in Brooklyn. The thing that I thought was really interesting about this performance is that it amplified the interactions that can happen with AI technology, especially when humans are experiencing isolation. And I'm going to show you a little clip from that. In the past, populations hid in fear during an eclipse when the moon passed across the sun. So AIN has gone on to perform in many venues in 2023. AIN was asked to perform at the United Nations headquarters here in New York City as part of the first International Day of Care and Support. For the performance, I reached out to a number of friends that I had met around the world in my travels, and especially women, and asked them to write a text that described their experience with care and support. And these are women primarily that are disproportionately affected by the burden of caring and supporting for both family and communities. So I had friends from Yemen that were writing. I had a friend who was an immigrant from Bosnia and Herzegovina during the war. So a really wide range of responses. And AIN then really stood in for all the absent voices that were not heard. And then I'm going to end with a relatively recent performance I did last year in collaboration with Itzia Barrio, another artist and friend who lives right around the corner here. So for this performance, I decided not to include an AIN and instead actually use language. And Itzia had been developing a performance, and an AI model that was trained on an early version of GPT-2. And the data set that she had created was the poetry of the performer on the right, which is Candy Store, and also the Cyber Feminism Index and Project Gutenberg. And I included Jason Barnes, who used some of my images from videos and then generated AI alterations and new imagery from that. And I will again give you a short excerpt.
There have been times, however, where the dragon has gone after the body, leaving it lying in fear of life and death. There are many. I was interested in your art and your prose and your scientific and your science and your pictures and all the bells and the cables, and you were interested in the stories that you told me. You told me the stories, the nay. I had a lot of trouble imagining that I would have gender. Old Iron Man and the adventures of Dan and 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 Dan and
Technology is seductive, really seductive. But just because you can doesn't mean you should. And I'm going to echo Nadim here in that humans created this technology and humans will continue to create this technology. I really feel that this is a time when diverse voices, creative voices must be included and really need to ask questions about who holds the money and the power and the profits and what voices are absent. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Two such thought-provoking talks, and both with really lovely and evocative slides as well. So yeah, thank you very much to both of you. We have got some questions in the Q&A, and just to kick off, just to say that yeah, in the face of what is coming toward us, and also the environmental impact of AI, which we don't have the scope to talk about right now, but it's on all of our minds. The idea that AI is, as Nadim said, human-powered, and Janet, your line at the beginning that algorithms are stories; these are human-made technologies, and we the people need to figure out what we want from them. So super interesting. I think also that there's a couple of questions that talk about what we feed the AI, and one of those issues is one that has come up for me repeatedly, really, which is the business of representation of non-English language work in the LLMs, in these giant large language models that currently generate most of the text-based AI that some of us as writers and publishers are working with, and what to do about this issue of vast numbers of languages in the world not being represented in these large language models at all. And I wondered if either of you had any thoughts on that particular issue.
Sure, I do. But Janet, do you want to go first? You've just finished your...
Sure, I will absolutely weigh in here. I think that the fact that most large language models are just scraping the web means that they are limited to the dominant economic forces on this planet. And I would argue that not only are there languages that are missing, but there's a huge percentage of the population that does not have access to technology. And I think, for we in the West, that becomes a large we. We even realized that during the pandemic, there were so many kids that didn't have a computer, that couldn't, their education was interrupted. And then you talk about the places on the planet that are not wired, that are, don't have electricity. So I am not sure how inclusive this technology will be. And I'm also fairly sure that the real powers behind it don't care. And so, if you're looking at the men of big tech, if you're looking at Zuckerberg and Altman, they don't care whose voices are included, and they certainly don't care if everybody has access to technology. So then it becomes a big challenge, one that I'm not sure, I may not be the most optimistic voice here on that.
Nadeem, what's your perspective on that?
It's not contradictory to that. It's just it's perhaps slightly different. I'm not an apologist for AI companies, and I think there's been lots of bad behavior, particularly the kind of the theft of copyrighted materials, which will be put right one way or the other, either through courts being punitive or a kind of a recognition and remuneration model that becomes applied to everything that's gone in the past. But I kind of liken AI in my mind and the current models to somebody who stole 3 eggs and made the most amazing omelet and offered it out of a window into the street, and people said, "My God, that's the best omelet I've ever seen." And so they kind of proved the case that with a few eggs they could make astonishing omelets. And so now what they're doing is going around to all the chicken farms and saying, "Can we buy all your eggs, please?" And that is the process that's going on at the moment. The publishers weren't ready. They weren't kind of organized to sell all of their literature to an AI company, which they'd never heard of a few months before anyway, and had no idea what was about to come. And the AI companies had no idea how to deal with all these publishers, which are from an entirely different ecosystem. So I think there was kind of a real mismatch of the supply and demand, which led to the bad behavior. I think that's now going to get worked out, partly because of the law and partly because of the need. AI models need as many eggs as they can get, and they'll buy them everywhere. And I think in the end, they'll probably pay a fair price for it. I would urge publishing as an industry to license everything that's ever been published and to make it included in LLMs. And in doing so, to generate new money for publishing, to reward authors for works. I mean, our business model exists because 95% of published works never get seen. We advertise stuff that nobody can ever find or see. It's terrible. There's a huge amount of work that sits there unknown. Putting everything that's ever been written, or at least published, into an LLM certainly makes it better than it is today. There is a misconception that if this is the kind of the whole world of content, that it's all been scraped and it's all an LLM. Actually, it isn't that at all. They've just taken these little slivers, and with those little slivers, those 3 eggs here and there, they've shown what they can do. We need to kind of get the whole lot in there so that, as I said earlier on, empathy and compassion and benevolence and all the positive things kind of get included now. And that's the way I think we'll diminish bias. I think we'll still be left with the problem that, the beggar under the bridge in Mumbai who has a creative thought, hasn't had it expressed or crafted or articulated, her notion of creativity in the world won't get included in the LLM anytime soon. But, one of the things I loved about Janet's presentation was the kind of showing that the kind of the collision of different technologies and morphologies and personalities leads to new art forms. That's what we were just witnessing. And I think AI can really help to accelerate and reinforce all that. So more AI enabled art forms expressed and captured and then assimilated, and all the published work in the world being properly recognized, properly remunerated, and then include it into AI. That's what I would be doing.
Super interesting. Not without controversy, but really,
No.
really thought-provoking. Janet, there's a question here, which are the same tensions that we're seeing in the publishing world present in the art world as well? What's your thinking on that? I mean, certainly in the worlds that we inhabit, people do feel very threatened. People are worried that AI is going to not only steal their work, but steal their livelihood in the future as well. Is there anything similar going on in the art world in that regard?
I think there is. I think there are multiple art worlds. The one that I think many people know of, which is the big moneyed one, feels perhaps maybe a little more insulated from AI technology and dedicated to quote unquote originality and paint on canvas kind of moment. But I think the reality is that all creative fields like writing, publishing, certainly the music industry and the creative arts, I mean, now that we can, that you can put a couple prompts in and have a visual product come out, that it does make artists wonder what their future is. But I think it's yes, probably less crucial for the fine arts at this stage, and probably more worrisome for the arts in terms of design and other applications. But it is definitely a worry.
I think we should finish with one final question for you both, which has come from our colleague Amy, it's come from Becky from the chat. What is one thing you would say to someone who's skeptical of using AI? One positive thing that you think would lead someone to maybe rethink and have a look at some positive impacts that AI might have in their creative endeavors.
Nadeem, do you want to? Should you be the voice of optimism? I may not.
I'll certainly let you have the last word. I think just have a conversation with AI. I don't think I've seen anybody, and I've interacted with many skeptics, including people in my own family. Once they start interacting, they're astonished, and then they get mesmerized, and then they start finding a constructive way to get some value out of the interaction. I created a whole leadership remuneration model that actually extends to 50 pages of Word just by an iterative discussion with the professional version of an AI. Amazingly helpful for me. I've led lots of companies and I've never had such a good plan before. Amazing. But my son was trying to work out the best way to get tickets to a festival somewhere in the countryside, and he figured it out talking to an AI. It kind of helps you with almost whatever you need. And I would just say engage. Don't turn your nose up at it and leave yourself out of it. It's here.
Get used to it.
Yeah, I mean, it has been part of our lives for years now, in ways that we're aware of, and certainly in ways that we're not aware of. And the way you ended your talk, Nadine, which is like that AI is created by humans and arguably one of the most creative things we have produced. And, it is astonishing. But it is an astonishing tool. And I think that, and so I would say to young creatives that use it as a tool. It's amazing. It gives you an ability to, it gives larger accessibility and potential to, anytime something is unknown, it makes us become more creative. And generative AI is becoming this new unknown, and that's an interesting position. But again, I would say that, one of the things that I am very cautious about is, again, the money and the power that's involved here, and the lack of creative input, the creative voices that are, contributing to the further development of it. And we must be present because it's going to go on without us. And so I think for that reason, you know, it's a kind of responsibility to work with it, but so that you don't end up with individual silos and, you know, just a feedback loop of your own thoughts. And, you know, coming from a country where we just had an election that is taking all guardrails away from AI development, you know, I think, again, it sits on individuals' shoulders now to make sure that that inclusion happens. So yes, engage.
Well, that was really such an interesting session, such, yeah, really thought-provoking talks and really great questions as well in the Q&A, which we don't have time to get to now. But I'll just end by saying thank you, Nadeem. Thank you, Janet. Thank you so much for agreeing to speak with us today. And we've got our next webinar is coming up. Just let me pull up that information. 19th of February at 12 o'clock UK time, which is on AI and writing for games. And for that session, we've got Imven Eke, Richard Cole, and Joseph Wilk, chaired by Sarah Campbell. So you should have seen a link for that in the chat. But if not, we'll make sure to spread the word about it. So once again, thank you to Janet. Thank you to Nadeem. That was a super, super interesting session. And thank you for everybody who came along today.
Yeah, thank you for your time and for the invitation. It's lovely.
Thank you. It was an honor.